All right. Well, good morning, everybody. When I was about 13, 14, 15 years old, I can remember going through this period of time in my life when I was really wrestling with my faith. I grew up in church, from day one, my entire life. Went to church. My family were Christian. My grandfather was a pastor. But I remember, going through those what we call the classical education model, the dialectic years, where you're really wrestling and trying to understand how all of this fits together. And I can remember during that period of time really wrestling with the fact that, I'm only a Christian because my parents are Christians. I'm only a Christian and my parents are only Christians because we live in a Christian country where most people are Christians. And I can remember thinking in my mind, if I grew up in Saudi Arabia, I'd probably be a Muslim. My parents would be Muslims. I'd probably be Muslim. Had I grown up in India, I'd be a Hindu. My parents would all be Hindus. Had I grown up in some other location, if I had grown up in Nepal or Tibet or something like that, I'd probably be a Buddhist. My parents would probably be Buddhist. But the thing that really tripped me up as I began to study different religions and what different people believed and different faith concepts, what really got me is maybe there's not even any religion that's right. Maybe there's not even a God. And I began to wrestle with that question. Does God even exist at all? And that's a topic that I want to tackle today because I imagine that at some point in your life, you've wrestled with that question. And I just want to ask you, and please be honest, how many of you at some point in your life have wondered, I wonder if there even is a God? Right? And many of us grew up in church, we grew up, and that's the vast majority, if not everybody in the room just raised their hand. Some of you, I would imagine, are even wrestling with that question right now, if we were being totally honest. Is there really a God? And so that's why we're doing this series, Who Needs Faith, over the next 4 weeks together, through the month of February. And I'm really excited about this series because we're going to be tackling some really interesting topics together in this series. In fact, we're looking at some big questions that people have. Maybe not so much within the church, but I think even in the church sometimes we have some big questions. I know I have a lot of questions about God. And I'm sure that you have some questions about God as well. Next week when we come back together, hopefully you'll be able to make it back with us next Sunday. We're going to be looking at the question, are the Gospels reliable? Are the accounts of Jesus in the New Testament, is the story of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, is it legit? Or is that just another one of those fairy tales that we're believing in? In a couple of weeks, in the third week of this series, we're going to be wrestling with one of the things that a lady brought up in the video clip that we just watched. The problem of evil, the problem of suffering. If there's a good God who is all-powerful and he hates evil, then why is there evil? Why doesn't he just get rid of all the evil if he's so powerful that he can do anything? So we're going to wrestle with that question in week 3. And then finally in week 4, we're going to look at one of the things, a lot of people say, well, I believe in science. And a lot of people say, no, I have... God's real, I tell you. He's trying to show you right now. He just pushed that microphone stand right over. In week 4, science versus faith. Is there really an issue? Do you have to pick one or the other? Do you have to choose, well, I'm going to believe in Christianity, or I'm going to believe in God, or I'm going to believe in religion or faith, or I'm going to believe in science? Are those things incompatible with one another? That's what we're going to be talking about in week 4. So again, I hope that you'll come back. Obviously, as a pastor, I'm going to be coming at, and this disclaimer right up front, I'm going to be coming at all of these topics from a theistic worldview, right? We're going to present these from a theistic worldview because that's the position that obviously I adhere to. But I understand that if you're here today or if you're watching by video, you might not be in that same place. As we think about the spiritual spectrum, there are some people who believe in God. And there's, different forms of that belief, right? We are Christians. So that's a form of theism. Theism comes from the Greek word theos, which just means God. So a theist is a person who believes in God. So as we go through this series, we use the word theist. We're talking about people who believe in God. And then under that are all these subsets of different people who believe in God. Muslims believe in God. Jehovah's Witnesses believe in God. Mormons believe in God. All those people would be considered theists. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have an atheist. Whenever you put the letter A in front of a word, it negates it, it makes it no. And so an atheist is someone who believes there is no theos, there is no God. And then in the middle, and there's a spectrum of where people are in their beliefs. But right in the middle would be what you would call an agnostic or an agnosis. The word gnosis in Greek means knowledge. So it's someone who's saying, there might be a God, but I have no knowledge of who that God is or what that God is. And most people who are agnostics don't believe in a personal God that you can have a relationship with. And so there is this philosophical debate that's been going on for millennia about this whole concept of God. What is there a God? Is there a personal God? Is there just some being out there that got it all started? You know, do we even need to believe in a God at all? And one of the things I want to say right up front is, when it comes to debates and arguments about this, let's just acknowledge right at the beginning that there are some really smart people on both sides of this debate. There are some really smart people. You know, you got Stephen Hawking and Richard Dawkins. You got some really smart people who say, no, we don't need God, there is no God. Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, maybe some of you have read, you know, some of their writings, some of their books. Really intelligent, really smart people who make some really good arguments for their position. But then on the other side, we have John Lennox, and we have William Lane Craig, and we have, you know, great thinkers down through the ages who have believed that there was a God. And so we shouldn't build up straw man arguments, right? We shouldn't use circular reasoning. A straw man argument is basically like you prop up this argument that's just easy to knock over, right? Just to say that, well, people who believe in theism are all, you know, religious nuts. They're all fanatics. They're all, you know, just less intelligent than the really smart people who believe in science. Let's just admit right up front, no, there are some really smart people who believe in theism. But as theists, as people who are Christians, we also need to acknowledge there are some really smart people who make some really good arguments against the existence of God. So we just need to admit that right up front, because we can't have a constructive debate and discussion on this topic if we're just, you know, throwing spitwads at one another. So let's just acknowledge that there are really smart people on both sides. And here's the thing I want to say right at the beginning. This is kind of our big idea for the day. Our big idea for this message is this. We need to build our beliefs on what is real, not on what we feel. You need to build your beliefs on what is real, not on what you feel. All of us have a worldview. All of us have a belief system. And that's true whether you're a theist or you're an atheist. And there's actually a verse in the Bible, in the book of Hebrews, that says this. In Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1, it says, now faith is the assurance of things hoped for. It's the conviction of things not seen. So the author of Hebrews is saying that when it comes to faith is like, it's an assurance of something that we kind of hope is true. Now for the atheist, they have an assurance, they have a hope that there is no God because they don't want to have to stand before Him one day and give an account for how they live their life. On the opposite side, Christians also have faith, right? The atheist has faith, the Christian has faith. No, there is a God, and one day I am going to stand before Him, and I'm going to have to give an account of my life. Either side has faith. One has the faith to believe, no, there is no God, and science is all we need. And the other says, no, you know, we believe in science, but there is a God that we believe in. And so either way, there is a conviction about things that we cannot see. We cannot rewind history and time and go all the way back to the beginning and see how it all started. We can't. We can't do that. So all of us have faith to believe in something that we cannot see. What happened in the beginning? What got all of that we see started? And so there's a conviction about that. So here's what I want to do. In just the next couple minutes, I want to talk about the difference between physics and metaphysics. Now, what is that? What is physics? First of all, physics deals with what is in the natural world. Physics deals with what is in the natural world. Metaphysics, the Greek prefix meta means beyond. So metaphysics deals with what is beyond the natural world. There are some things in this world that physics deals with, right? The scientific method. Things that we can see, things that we can touch, things that we can hear, things that we can smell. We can use our senses to explore. We can use the scientific method to explore the physical world. There are things in this world that we know for sure because we can handle them, we can see them, we can do scientific experiments to prove these things to be true. But there are also things in this world that physics can't explain, that science cannot explain. There are paranormal things that are outside of what is normal, things that are outside of what we would understand to be laws of physics that we just can't explain. And scientists and philosophers have been wrestling with that concept, that there is physics and there is metaphysics, for thousands of years. There are questions that physics cannot answer. So here's one of those questions. Does God exist? When we come to that question, really what we're dealing with is a metaphysical question. It is a question that goes beyond the natural world. And so what I want to do is I just want to develop a logical response to that question. Does God exist? By the way, it's not a new question. It's a question that people have been asking for a long time. Even in Jesus' day, there were people who had been debating the meaning of life. There were people who had been debating, even in Jesus' time, 2,000 years ago, there were people who had been debating for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the origin of the universe, even at that time. And into that debate steps this guy named John. And so if you have your Bible, we're going to John chapter 1, the Gospel of John. John, sometimes referred to as the Apostle John, or if you grew up Catholic, maybe Saint John. And so John writes his Gospel. And there are 4 Gospels, and we're going to talk about those next Sunday. There are 4 Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and then this guy that we're talking about here today, John. And John just happened to be the person who wrote from a more philosophical perspective. He gives more of a philosophical approach to the life of Christ because he wasn't writing to Jews. He's writing to both Jew and Gentile to help them understand what he's talking about. And so John is writing to say to Greek and Roman philosophers of his day, hey, for those of you who have been thinking about physics, for those of you who have been thinking about what we see in the natural world, the things that we can taste, touch, handle, smell, all these senses that we can use, for those of you who aren't convinced about where the world came from, where the universe originated from, John says this in John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Would you take a moment just to pray with me? Lord, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning. Lord, to kick around this whole idea, this big question of whether you even exist. Lord, am I just praying to the wind right now? Or am I praying to a God that can actually hear, who will actually respond? Lord, as a Christian, I believe that the answer is yes, you do exist. But Lord, I pray that you would speak through your word, speak through this message, speak through the logic of what I'm going to present. And God, I pray that you would bring faith, greater faith, into our hearts. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So the big idea, again, for this morning is this. We need to build our beliefs. Not on what we feel, right? Just because we're Christians and we feel like God exists, doesn't mean God exists. We need to build our belief on facts, not feelings. We need to build our beliefs on what is real, not on what we feel. And I would say that that's equally true for the atheist as well. An atheist needs to build their belief system on facts, not feelings. A Christian, a theist, needs to build their belief system on facts, not on feelings. There are several really cool things in this passage that we just read from John chapter 1, verses 1 through 5. But I want to just hone in for a moment, if we could, on verse 1. John said this, in the beginning was what? The Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now this is really significant. Some translations, maybe you have a different translation in your lap there, or if you're on your smartphone, some translations say, in the beginning, the Word already existed. So at the beginning of time, the Word preceded that. The Word was already there. It was already on the scene. And one thing that I want you to notice is that the word is a capital W there. You see that 3 different times we have the word, and the word is capitalized. Who is John talking about here in John chapter 1? Well, remember that the New Testament was not originally written in English. We have the opportunity to read it in English today, but it was not originally written in English. It was originally written in Koine Greek. And in Greek, the word for word, hopefully this is not confusing you, the word for word is logos. It's the word logos, not to be confused with like a logo that you might have on your shirt right now. The logos. Now, where did this concept of the logos come from? Well, in ancient Greek philosophy, particularly with the Stoics, do you guys remember studying the Stoics? There was the Epicureans and there were the Stoics. They had different belief systems where the Stoics were really philosophical, and this was one of the things that they were trying to figure out, where did the universe come from? How does it all hold together? How does all this work? When we look at the physical world, we get that. There are laws at play, and they believe that there was design. They believe, if there are laws in place that govern our world, then there must be a lawgiver. That's what the Stoics believed. That behind the laws, there must have been someone who put those laws into motion, who put those laws into action. Now, these people, these Greek philosophers, didn't believe in Jesus. Jesus wasn't even around yet. But they believed in something that they called the Logos. The Logos was the designer. It was the lawgiver. That's what the Stoics believed. They believed in some spiritual energy that was governing all reality. And they called that spiritual energy the Force. And they said, may the Force... there was a Star Wars marathon on yesterday, so I just got confused about that. But no, they didn't believe in the Force. They believed in the Logos. That's what the Stoics believed in. That's what they based their belief system upon. They believed that there were physical laws, and so if there were physical laws, there must be something metaphysical that we can't understand or explain. They didn't believe that God was a personal God. They didn't think they could have a relationship with Him, but they believed behind all these laws that we can explore and understand, there was something that we can't fully understand. And they called that something the Logos. And so into that, John comes and John says, guys, you believe in the Logos. Let me tell you, the Logos is for real. But the Logos isn't an impersonal God. The Logos is who? Jesus. Jesus is the manifestation of this divine lawgiver that you guys already believe in. Now the interesting thing is Jesus Himself is praying a prayer just a few chapters later in John chapter 17 in verse 5. And in John chapter 17 verse 5, Jesus prays, Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory that I had with you when? Before the cosmos existed. Before the world, before the universe existed, I was with you, Father. Jesus is the Logos according to John. So John is telling us that before the world existed, the Logos was there, just like the Stoics of John's day believed, that the Logos was this divine lawgiver, that God was there, and that Jesus was with God, and that this Logos took on flesh, and He came down, and He dwelt among us, He lived among us in the person of Jesus Christ. Now, besides the Stoics, so in Greek philosophy, where a lot of our Western philosophy comes from today, a lot of the arguments that we make for God come from Greek arguments from 2,500, 3,000 years ago. Besides all of that, when John says in the beginning was the Word, not only would that have spoken, things to the Greek philosophers, but it also would have spoken to another set of people. It also would have spoken to Jews. Why would it have spoken to Jews? Why would it have meant something to the Jews when John says, in the beginning was the Word? Well, it's because, as every good Jew would know, the very first words of the Bible say what? In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. See, there is this assumption right from the first verse of the Bible that there is a God that was behind everything that we see. So the Greek philosophers believe that, and the Jewish theologians and Jewish people believe that as well. And so when John says in the beginning was the Logos, he's saying, you guys are both right. Greeks, you philosophers, you believe in the Logos, you believe in a divine lawgiver, you're right. Jewish people, you believe that there was God, He was in the beginning, He created everything that we see. You're right. It's just, you're both right, and Jesus is the manifestation of what you both believe. Jesus was there in the beginning. He was the one created it all. In Colossians chapter 1, Paul steps up to the plate. And Paul says this, He, speaking about Jesus, the Logos, existed before anything else, and He, the Logos, holds all creation together. So the thing that the Greek philosophers already believed, that there was a divine lawgiver who was holding it all together, who had all the laws put into motion. He exists, He created it all, and He's holding it all together. And Paul says, that person, that Logos that you already believe in, because of all these laws that we see, it's Jesus. It's Jesus. And he's basically saying it's not some impersonal force that's going to be with you. It's Jesus. He is the manifestation of God. Now, I'm pretty sure at this point, some of you are thinking right now, especially if you're a skeptic. If you're here today and you're skeptical of faith, you're skeptical of theism, you're skeptical of Christianity, first of all, number one, thank you for coming. We're excited that you're here. Thank you for just entertaining this subject with us this morning. But if you're here and you are skeptical, you're probably thinking, this is a nice little sermon, Thomas. It's great, but where's the evidence? Where's the evidence for any of this junk that you're saying right now? Because I ain't buying it. And I can appreciate that. I can appreciate how you feel. But here's the thing. I want you to write this down. Scripture suggests that our origin is moral, it's personal, and it's relational. Whatever that thing is, whatever that force is, whatever that Logos is, whatever that thing is that created all the laws that we see at play in our world, in our universe, whatever that is, what Scripture suggests is you can actually know that God. He's personal. He's relational. He actually wants to have a relationship with you. And beyond that, He's also moral. He's the one who, not only did He create the physical laws that govern our world, but He also creates the moral laws. He created the moral laws, which also govern our world. Now listen, there are a lot of good reasons to believe in God. I think there are a lot of good reasons. We only have time today to explore two. I could lay out a much more in-depth argument if I had, 5 or 6 or 7 hours of your time. But I'm imagining most of you would like to take a nap before the Super Bowl. So, we're going to let you out of here in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to give you just 2 really good reasons why you should consider believing in God. And the first one is this. It's the moral argument. In every generation, in every civilization, for thousands upon thousands of years, the evidence shows us that human beings have lived by certain moral standards, certain moral codes. And although your internal moral code may look a little bit different than my internal moral code, the fact remains that we all have been hardwired to have a basic understanding between right and wrong. The Latin word conscience, from which we get conscience. It's 2 Latin words, con with, science, knowledge. Whenever you do something wrong, you break your conscience, something that's inside of you, and you know it's wrong because you have knowledge. It's with knowledge that what you're doing is wrong. Where did that come from? Where did our conscience come from? And why do all of us have a conscience? Again, even though it might look slightly different in every scenario, we all have a basic understanding of right and wrong. Which is why tonight, if you stay up late enough to watch the 11 o'clock news after the Super Bowl comes to a conclusion, there will probably be some story on the news, because there always is, of something hideous, something heinous that happened today or this week. And that story is going to disturb you. And that story is going to disgust you, that a human being can do such a thing to another human being. Why is that? Why do we all feel that? Where does that come from? Well, the Bible has an explanation for this. In Romans chapter 2, verses 14 and 15, it says, even Gentiles who do not have God's written law show that they know His law when they instinctively obey it, even without having heard it. If I could take this, if I could just extrapolate something, or maybe put the Thomas Loman paraphrase into this, even atheists who do not, go back to that verse, even atheists who do not have God's law, in other words, they don't even read the Bible, they don't care to read the Bible, they don't care what the Bible says, even an atheist who doesn't accept God's written law or believe in God's laws, show that they have His law written on their heart because they instinctively obey it. We all, even atheists, even agnostics, theists, everybody has a basic understanding of right and wrong. We know the difference between good and evil. Why is that? Well, the next verse tells us. They demonstrate that God's law, right? We all have a conscience. We all know the difference between right and wrong. It's been written into our hearts. For their conscience and their thoughts either accuse them when they do something wrong, or it tells them when they're doing something right. Where did that come from? Where did that come from? Evolution cannot explain that. You see, there's a big problem here. And if everything is random, and if there is no logos, if there is no moral force behind the laws of the universe, then why are we intrinsically moral creatures? Why? I want you to write this down on your outline. Evolutionary explanations fail to explain altruistic acts. I know I just threw a whole bunch of big words at you, so let me see if I can just unpack that a little bit and explain. If survival of the fittest is true, which is basically the bottom line of evolution, it's what evolution is about, then there is no explanation for someone showing concern and kindness and even sacrifice towards a total stranger when that sacrifice or that kindness puts their own life at risk. For example, just last year, in June of 2018, there was a blind man in Toronto, Canada, who tripped and fell onto the subway tracks. He hit his head, knocked him out, he's bleeding, and at some point in the very near future, a train's going to get there. So guess what happened? Some good people, some kind-hearted people, some people with compassion, 3 young men saw what happened, and at risk to their own life, jumped onto the tracks, which have high voltage lines running through them, knowing that they could die. They jumped down onto these tracks to save a total stranger who could not help himself because he was incapacitated at the time. Now, one of the bystanders who was interviewed after all of this took place and saw it all unfold, her name was Sherry Hebden. This is what she said to one of the local newspapers who were writing an article about this story. Sherry Hebden said this: people's first instinct, their first instinct was to do what? Help. Their first instinct, that totally flies in the face of evolutionary theory. How would their first instinct be to jump onto a tracks when they could die, when they could be snuffed out, their own life be snuffed out? People's first instinct, she says, was to run and help. It was clear people jumped down to the tracks even before the power was shut off. It was quite a dire situation. It's nice to see the good in people. My question is why? Why? Why do we consider people like that? And if you see the article, why do we consider them heroes? Why would we consider them heroes? It seems like if evolution is true, and if natural selection is true, and if survival of the fittest is right, we should consider these people less than intelligent. We should consider these people evolutionarily challenged. They're not heroes, they're zeros. And these are the kind of people we need to get rid of because they're messing up the evolutionary chain of how this is supposed to go. We're supposed to survive. We're supposed to advance and get better and get stronger. And this is kind of messing that up. I mean, why would these young men risk their own lives to save a blind man? I mean, that's the kind of people that are messing up the gene pool. It seems like the exact opposite of natural selection. And yet we celebrate them. All of humanity would celebrate these three young men as heroes. People to be admired. Now, if evolution and naturalism are true, then why not just do what benefits you? Why do anything to help strangers, especially if it puts your life at risk? If it puts your safety at risk? Of course, very, 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 very few people actually live that way. Why? Because there is something inside of you, and there is something inside of me that believes there is a greater good. Where did that come from? Where did it come from? It comes from the moral and the personal and the relational God who put that inside of our souls. That's where it came from. In fact, Jesus spoke to this when he says in John 15:13, he says, "Greater love has no one than this, that one would lay down his life, risk his own life for his friends." And Jesus manifested that himself. Jesus not only said that, but he believed it so much that he was willing to actually do that, to lay down his life for his friends. But Jesus even took it a step farther. Jesus not only laid down his life for his friends, Jesus laid down his life for his enemies. Jesus laid down his life for strangers. Even people who hated him. Why? Why do we see that as a good thing, as a hero, when someone would put their life at risk to save a total stranger? It's the moral argument. Where did that come from? The second argument, we're going to end with this one, is the cosmological argument. I mentioned earlier that word cosmos, that Greek word from which we get universe or worlds. The cosmological argument. Every Monday morning, I have the opportunity to hang out with some really cool 8th grade homeschool students. And one of the things that I have the opportunity to tutor them in, to teach them about, is logic. Logic. And so most of my students hate the subject because it's really hard. It's the hardest subject that we do at the 8th grade level with our homeschool students. But I love it. And one of the things that we talk about in logic is something called a syllogism. Now, if you're not familiar with the syllogism, I'm just going to show you a very basic syllogism right now that deals with the argument for God's existence. And that is this. Premise number 1. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise number 2. The universe began to exist. Conclusion. Therefore, the universe has a cause. Theists and atheists basically agreed for centuries that anything that begins to exist necessarily has to have a cause. So, for example, a little over 40 years ago, I began to exist. Does anyone need me to explain how that came about? I prefer not to. None of us like thinking about mom and dad doing such things. So we'll just move on. But a little over 40 years ago, I began to exist. And there was a cause behind my existence. We'll leave it at that. All of you that work for a company, that company at some point in the finite past began to exist. And that company that you worked for had a cause. It had a founder who put it into place. Somebody started it. Now, when you apply that to the universe, where did the universe come from? Again, that is the question that goes beyond physics into metaphysics. Physics cannot answer that question. I read so many articles this week getting ready for this message from all of these different scientific journals. Basically, they all said, science can't explain it. We don't know. That moves into metaphysics. We can't explain where the universe came from. But the author of Hebrews does tell us. In Hebrews 11, verse 3, it says, by faith we understand that the universe was formed at God's command, so that what is seen was not made out of what was visible. In Latin, we have two words, ex nihilo, came from nothing, out of nothing. How can something come out of nothing? That is the big question. Where did it all come from? Now, for centuries and centuries, theists and atheists were arguing over cosmology, but theists said, we have the explanation for this. The universe, everything that we see, it originated with God. God was the cause. God was at the beginning. God had no beginning. He's always been there. He's the first cause. He's the first mover. Atheists, on the other side, said, no, we don't accept God's existence. We can't do any experiments to see God. I can't, pull God down from heaven and say, see, here he is. He's the one who created it all. So trying to use just purely physical explanations, what atheists did and what scientists did for millennia is say the universe has always existed. And so there was a stalemate. For thousands of years, there was a stalemate. Theists, God created the universe, and everything that we see. Atheists, no, the universe isn't created. It always has been. And that's where we all came from. It's the universe. It's matter and energy. It's always been around. Well, that was a really pretty good argument, and there was a stalemate up until about 100 years ago. And 100 years ago, scientists figured out that the universe had a beginning. The universe had a beginning. Now today, just about universally, the scientific community accepts what is referred to as the Big Bang Theory. And a lot of Christians are afraid of the Big Bang Theory. Not to be confused with the show. A lot of Christians like the Big Bang Theory show, but they're afraid of the Big Bang Theory because they think it messes up like our beliefs as Christians. The Big Bang created it all. So we can't believe that because we're Christians. We believe God created it all. But let me tell you, the Big Bang Theory does nothing to discredit Christianity. What the Big Bang Theory does is it discredits atheism. Because the Big Bang Theory tells us that matter, energy, time, and space all have a beginning. It all had a starting point. And so the Big Bang deals a big blow to atheism. It deals a big blow to atheism. If matter and energy and space and time all go back to whatever you want to say that period, 13.7 billion years ago, whatever you want to say, it all had a starting point. It all came from something. So we know now the universe has not always existed. Almost every scientist accepts that. So now what they're trying to do is they're trying to come up with explanations to discredit the thing that we've all agreed on for eons, that if something came into existence, there had to be a cause behind that. That has been accepted by both sides for thousands upon thousands of years. And now science has proven that the universe is not the explanation behind it all. So now scientists are trying to scramble to come up with some other explanation. And so now we get into quantum mechanics and quantum theory and all this stuff, and they're trying to come up with explanations, and they can't explain it because it moves into the metaphysical. But theists have been saying the same thing, and our story hasn't changed. In the beginning, God. In the beginning, God. The Big Bang deals a big blow to atheism. Matter energy, space, and time all had a starting point. And as we already stated, both theists and atheists agree that anything that begins to exist must, out of necessity, have a cause. Theists have a great explanation. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9 says, He saved us. Now Paul's talking about Jesus here. Jesus saved us. He called us to a holy life, not because of anything we have done, but because of His own purpose and grace. And listen to this last part. This grace was given us in Christ Jesus when? Before what? The beginning of time. Up until 100 years ago, we didn't know there was such a thing as before the beginning of time. From a scientific perspective. From a physical perspective. It wasn't until 100 years ago that we learned that there was a beginning to time and space and energy and matter. Before the beginning of Chronos. Before the beginning of time. Now how, here's my question, how could Paul have known that 2,000 years ago if we just discovered it within the last 100 years, that time had a beginning? How could Paul have known that? I'll tell you how. It's because the God who told him to write it down was there. He was there in the beginning. He let Paul know 2,000 years ago, Paul of Tarsus, Paul, I want you to write these words down. There is so much more to say on this subject. There are so many more great arguments for the existence of God. The teleological argument, the ontological argument, so many arguments from design. There are so many great arguments that we could use to show from a rational, logical perspective, there must, out of necessity, be a God. But we're out of time for today. I hope you will come back next week, and the following week, and the fourth week, as we continue to build the case for God's existence. And I just want to say this, again, the thing that we said from the very beginning. We need, all of us, whether you're an atheist, whether you're a theist, you need to build your beliefs on what is real, not on what you feel. Just because you don't feel like there should be a God or there is a God, whatever your explanation is, even if you believe there is a God, don't just base it on the fact that, well, I've always been taught that, it's all I've ever known, I grew up in church my whole life, right? Or, you know, the Bible says the Bible's true, so obviously the Bible's true. That's called circular reasoning. That's not logical. It's self-refuting. So, we don't just believe the Bible is true because the Bible says it's true. We don't just believe in God because God says so in His Word. There are reasons, rational, logical reasons why we could and we should believe in God. Here's what I want to encourage you. This is the life application as we close and as the worship team comes back up in just a second. You need to go where the evidence guides you. Go where the evidence guides you. The truth is that many people who grew up believing in God, they left the faith a long time ago. They turned away from their faith. But on the flip side, many people who grew up believing there was no God have begun to study the evidence and have come to the conclusion there must be a God. And I'm not just talking about Joe Schmo. I'm talking about PhD scientists who dedicated their life to scientific inquiry, who have proven to themselves through their research and through their studies, there has to be a God. There is no other explanation. Really smart people have come to that conclusion. Now, I don't know where you are on the spiritual spectrum when it comes to your faith journey, but I want to leave you with one final quote from somebody you've all heard of, who's really smart, maybe the smartest person to ever walk this planet, who, by the way, both atheists and theists point to his quotes to try to prove their side. So let me just say that right up front. But Albert Einstein once famously said this. He said, "The more I study science, the more I believe in God." Now, disclaimer, he was not a Christian. He was what we would call an agnostic, right? He believed there had, when he studied the laws at work in our universe, when he studied all those equations, where did E equals MC squared? Where did that come from? Like, did that just magically appear out of nothing? No, it had a lawgiver behind that law. Just like every law of our universe had to have a lawgiver out of necessity. And Einstein said, the more I study science, the more I see all these laws that are at play, the more it makes me believe in God. Now, unfortunately, he didn't live long enough to eventually realize that the God that he didn't think he could know, he could know. So he still died in his agnosticism. He didn't believe in a moral, personal, relational God. He just believed in some deistic God that was out there that got it all started, but you can't really have a relationship with that God. Albert Einstein, unfortunately, fell just a little bit short. My question is, where are you on that spectrum? Where are you on this journey? Are you in that same place like this great mind, Albert Einstein, and others who have said, the more I study science, the more I see the design that's at work in our universe, the more I understand how it all works together so intricately. The more I study from a mathematical perspective, the more impossible it becomes. There has to be a God. There is no other explanation. And I understand that goes into the metaphysical. It's not something that we can prove using our five senses. It's not something that we can prove using the scientific method. But I do believe it is something that we can prove using logic. Let the evidence guide you wherever it guides you to. Go where the evidence guides you. For me, as a teenage boy who grappled with these questions and these thoughts, is there a God? If there is a God, which God is it? And as I began to go on that journey of just studying, what science said and then what different religions said, I came to the conclusion that there is no other God that makes sense outside of the Christian God. The only God that lines up with what we know about science is the God of the Bible. Every other God, every other world religion, every other spiritual text that you will read has a God that created within time and space, not outside of it. The only God from a religious, belief system who created ex nihilo, outside of space and time, is the God of the Bible. He was there before the beginning of time. The only God that makes sense is the God of the Bible. And the God of the Bible, who is a moral and personal and relational God, revealed himself to us in the person of Jesus Christ. He wanted us to know who he was. He wanted us to be able to have a relationship with him because he loves us and he has a purpose and a plan. There is meaning. You did not just arise out of some primordial soup. There is a purpose and a plan behind your life. It's even bigger than your life. But God loves each individual. And so as the worship team comes, and I'm going to invite a couple of our elders to come forward. If you're here this morning and you have never put your faith and your trust in the God who loved you enough to send his Son to reveal himself to you and to die on the cross for you, we want to give you that opportunity right now. With every head bowed, every eye closed, we're going to sing Build My Life one more time here at the end of the service. And as the song plays, we just want to open up this opportunity for you to come forward and pray. If you would like to learn more about how to become a Christian, if you've been on the fence about that decision, if today you have moved from the realm of being uncertain to certain, then we want to give the opportunity right now, in the quietness of this moment. Just pray a prayer like this. God, I believe you're real. God, I believe you exist. And God, even though I don't have all of my questions answered, even though I don't understand how it all works, I do understand this, that you love me, that you have a purpose in mind for my life. I'm not here by random chance. I'm here because you put me here. at this place and at this time in human history to fulfill your purpose. And so as much as I know how right now, God, I want to ask Jesus to be my Savior. I believe that Jesus, the Logos, the Word, became flesh. You, God, became flesh, and you dwelt among us. Not only to show us how to live a perfect life, not only to show us what it looks like to live a good life, but you lived a perfect life, something I never could live. And then you died on the cross in my place for my mistakes, for my sins, my shortcomings. So Jesus, I ask you to forgive me. I ask you to cleanse me. I ask you to save me. Save me from myself. Save me from my past.